I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. This is the last PDM webinar for the year, and we're going to be talking about securing your data. I'm Dennis Streeter, the PDM Product Manager for DASI Solutions, and I have Darren Grosser, our Application Engineer. And we'll be talking about a number of different topics here today for you, as well as showing you some different examples of SOLIDWORKS PDM, or Enterprise PDM as the solution is called. As we said, today's focus is going to be on data security. It's probably one of the first two foundation elements provided in a PDM solution that we focus on with Enterprise. So we're going to have some good examples and maybe some areas that you haven't thought of in the past as to the benefit of data security. And then Darren will be showing examples of how the Enterprise product actually addresses those challenges that are faced by many manufacturers today.
Yeah, now I know we always talk about revision control and things like that, Dennis, but really what is the idea or the thought behind leaky pipes in an organization?
Good question, Darren. There's probably, I'm sure as people signed up for this, there's more than a few people that wondered how leaky pipes fits in with DASI solutions and document management. And I guess, no, we're not getting into the plumbing business here. First and foremost, we're staying with technology. Even though we've all probably experienced the occasional plumbing challenge, and it kind of refers to that, and we'll be getting into it in more detail as we move into the presentation today. But a lot of the things that we talk about with PDM are almost like a leaky pipe in that they drip money out of your organization a little bit at a time, and before you know it, you've got a bucket full of water or profit sitting there that's been lost because you're not operating as efficiently as possible. So that's the reference to the leaky pipes there.
Okay.
And I think as we start out here, one of the other things that we really want to draw attention to is that data management and data security is not just for engineering department, where traditionally the sweet spot and with SOLIDWORKS users, it really applies to every department in your company that's using any type of documentation. And we'll talk a little bit more, excuse me, a little bit more about that as well as we go through our presentation today. But this will give you, this first slide gives you a little bit of a touch on where engineering data goes within a lot of manufacturing organizations. It's not just engineering, you know, sales, administration, quality control, field service, suppliers outside your company. All these different departments and resources and individuals are using data, and not just engineering data, but data that should probably be controlled in your company, even aside from the engineering centric data. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about here regarding data security is something that maybe isn't as apparent to everybody as is the case in this article offered by Bloomberg Business Week points out, related to IBM and some of their mainframe technology that's been around for quite a while. The technology staff that's been running those systems are starting to retire, and we see that a lot as well in the tool and die industry, maybe a little more pointed to Michigan businesses, that we have an aging workforce that's really outlasting a lot of the technology that's in use today, and still very viable technology. And it only accentuates the security that your companies have with the technology and the data that you own. If people are going to be retiring, or I guess maybe a little more unfortunate even to the Michigan environment, being laid off with all the unemployment that we've been faced and challenged with here, what's happening to the data that they've created in your company? Does somebody know where it resides? Is it securely vaulted? Is it organized in a way that's easy to have the existing work staff go back and find it? Or is it facing the potential of not being found or lost within just the maze of all the other data files that you have on your network? And that's one of the areas that we'll be focusing in as we move forward here with some examples that Darren will be showing. So here's that leaky pipe scenario. We've got that right off the bat here. And as you look at the different departments that are typically in manufacturing companies, you'll see the little illustration of some coins falling out at different points along the way. And you can kind of take your pick of the issues that your company may be challenged with here. Some of the ones that we've highlighted, Darren's going to be showing examples of in enterprise as we move forward. And it really does add up to a sizable amount of money when you start looking at this. And we'll be giving you some indications and some clues on how that might be affecting your company as we move forward with some return on investment tools as well. And before we get started into the demonstration here, let's put out another poll real quick, Darren, and get some input here. If you want to take a second to look at this question and give us your input, we appreciate that. Kind of evenly split there, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Is that something that you're able to share here, the results?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. So with everybody voted, let me just go ahead and put that up on the screen. Is that about what you expected?
Yeah, I would say that's the number one issue there is pretty common with most manufacturers. Getting the wrong version of a part built is definitely going to be an expensive concern that hits right to the bottom line that people readily see and can appreciate, especially in management, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree.
Okay. So with that, why don't we go over and take a look at a couple of examples that you have for us, Darren, on how we solve some of these problems with enterprise.
Well, obviously, the list has quite a few things on there, and all of them, you could argue, are just as important as the next. But as we've been showing the different things within enterprise, we want to give you an idea of some of the more critical things that can be addressed in a pretty easy format. We're always talking about things like the poll just mentioned there, actually creating the wrong version of a part. Wrong versions really is kind of in the eye of the beholder, sometimes based on what they see and sometimes based on what they don't know they're actually dealing with. So there's a couple of ways that this can get addressed. Now I'm pulling up my Windows Explorer screen because for those of you who haven't seen an enterprise data management webinar yet, the beauty of this tool really from a user standpoint is that you don't have to really learn a client to know how to get started with this tool. What I'm going to do is just simply go to my C drive, and here I have a couple of different local vault views. And essentially what those are is my window into the actual secure data that's on a repository computer controlled by an SQL database. Now when I try to access these folders, although if I navigated to any other folder on my computer I could go right into it, the local vault view itself is a secure location. So I'm instantly prompted for a login. Now in this case, I was already logged in as a particular user, as the administrator. But if I log out, you'll actually see that it kicks me out of the folder completely. So again, the data is secure as long as you're in with proper permissions. So now as a user, if I'd never been in that folder and tried to double-click and access, it'll prompt me with that login screen, and I can go ahead and type in username and password. As with data management across the board, permissions are what controls a lot of this stuff. And it also controls things like the latest version capabilities. By navigating through these folders, which again is just the same way that Windows Explorer navigation takes place, I can simply drill down into, in this case, my engineering design folder. Now within that folder I've got a lot of things happening. Here we have a lot of SOLIDWORKS assemblies and parts, which if I go ahead and select each of those is going to automatically start up my preview window. And in this case, because it's SOLIDWORKS data, it's going to start up with eDrawings as my preview. What I also see is information over here on the right-hand side about the actual revision level, whether it's got new versions or revisions available for it. And you can always scroll down and see that these files which are approved and released are showing as different versions. Now right here I have one that's a work in progress. It's not finished yet, still kind of in flux. And if I select on that particular part, what I know for a fact based on this is that I've got 3 different versions and revisions available to me. And I've got capabilities to go back and simply get the latest version if I want to. What I could also do in my actions is go back and get previous versions, like the created version, not the actual released version. So there's a variety of methods to actually make sure that this is the file that's available. Based on permissions, you can really go up and down this tree and be able to get to older versions, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But one of the main things is if I go to my administrative tool, we're really talking about permissions. And the permissions that this particular user has, when I'm looking at a user, we're talking about the administrator. And that administrator is part of this management folder, this management group. Now, the management group has permissions to do pretty much anything that they want to. But what I mainly want to be able to do is restrict what some of the people out there that are actually producing these parts can actually use and deal with. And one of those examples, and I'll elaborate on this further in a moment, is the manufacturing group. If I actually go into the settings for the manufacturing people, first of all, what I could see is who is in this group. And by simply double-clicking on that and checking group membership, you can see that we've got Dennis, who is doing our presentation today, is actually running the mill out on the floor. And based on Dennis's permissions, he really can only do a few specific things. I'll come back to that in a moment. But mainly, anybody that's in this manufacturing group, we can restrict their Explorer View access to actually only allow them to work with the latest version of a file. So the people that are consuming your data, not the designers, because they're dealing with files that are constantly in flux and changing, but the people who will consume them downstream, whether it's in purchasing, even the salespeople, we only want them dealing with latest versions of files. And of course, the people that are machining these documents, we certainly want them to only work with the latest and greatest versions of things. So that's the main thing that we've got on dealing with those working versions. Another part that we deal with when it comes to some of these leaks that we have within the system is how companies handle engineering change orders. Now, you can use any acronym that you want to describe what an engineering change is, but in the simplest of terms, it usually is prompted by somebody having to make a change, filling out a piece of paperwork to document the change, and then having to notify whoever is the next person in line that has to deal with that change, whether it's management approval or whether it's somebody that actually has to make that change real within the CAD system or any other aspect within the company. Now, late engineering change orders is a time thing, and time is money no matter how you slice it. What we want to make sure is that the lateness of these engineering change orders isn't attributed to the communication breakdowns that happen within a company every single day. So one of the mechanisms that we have within our tool is that if I want to go ahead and create an engineering change. Now, right now, I happen to be logged in as a person that's available to do that. So if we were to make a change, let's say to this very large overall assembly, which happens to be a miter box saw, changes can be prompted a variety of ways, but what we're trying to do here is mimic the way a company currently does it in a very manual, very paper-based aspect. A simple right-click on this file by a capable permissions-based user allows them to go down to the actual state of this file and change it to start an engineering change order. Now again, in reality, the way people do it now is they actually fill out a piece of paper and deal with it in that respect. Well, what I'm going to do on this one is mimic that by just simply prompting the change. And when I say OK on this file, we're actually mimicking what people do in real life by automatically launching Microsoft Word, opening up the template that we use for engineering change orders, and actually extracting data directly from the SOLIDWORKS file in question to populate the different fields within this form. Now, I can add on additional information, like what impact this might have. The change is going to be a manufacturing issue or just a purchasing issue or both. The reason for this is we have a new part, better and stronger. And then the description is just a, new yoke. Now, this change has now been documented with the engineering change order. And upon simply saving and closing this document, the system itself puts that engineering change order where it needs to be and also automatically notifies the necessary people that this change is now in process and it's now your turn to complete your part of the task. If we go up one level here, what you'll also see is a folder different than the one we started in called ECOs. And we've got the system set so that it will simply put that new engineering change order created by the administrator. Take a look at our timestamp. This happened just about a minute and a half ago. And it's now in the system ready to be consumed by whatever user is now tasked with that particular change. All the documentation and properties are automatically pulled in and are searchable and usable to categorize and organize this particular file. So that to me is a prime example of how we can change the timestamp and the time flux that we have on these engineering change orders so that people are notified immediately. And I didn't even have to leave my chair to do it.
Good stuff. I guess really today, and this has been going on for quite some time, but time really is a four-letter word in business, isn't it?
Yeah, it's among many.
Time is money, and especially in manufacturing. And I think when you start to think about PDM, before we get off to a couple other slides here, keep in mind the time value factor. And that's really what we talk about when we talk and look at advantages to PDM, is how that affects your organization today. And we're going to launch another quick poll here before we move on and ask you what your practices are that you're using today to secure your data. If you'd like to fill that out for us quick, and then we'll move on to our next topic here. Just a couple more to go here, and I'll close that, and I think maybe even I can share it on my end, Darren.
Okay.
Let's see what happens here. Looks like we have just one other to go. So we've got a little bit of everything, and as we'd expect in one of our webinars on document management, most people are probably using the Microsoft shared folders, or as we call it, brute force system here. So not a big surprise there.
Nope, not at all.
So moving on to next slide here. We want to talk about some of the common foundation benefits to PDM. And I think, Darren, you have a couple of examples in these different areas to review as well?
Yeah, these are 5 pretty typical things. Security, it really takes a lot of different forms. And some people think that security is really based on how much you can trust the guy sitting next to you. One of the things that we've heard multiple times throughout the years is that security, especially when we're talking about network connectivity in a world based with the internet, is that the biggest security concern that companies really have is not attacks from the outside. In fact, it's far from it. The biggest security concern is internal access to the data for people unauthorized to actually access that, or that data walking right out the door. So that's a little bit of an extreme example, but if you can control that, then anything else within that umbrella is certainly within the realm of control. So we want to make sure that not only the data is secure within the company, but also the right data is being used within the secure environment. So I'm going to show a couple examples on some of the things that we have here. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about file overwrite, and then after that I'm just going to move a little bit to the actual access control of the system. File overwrite, especially because most of the people answered that it was Windows-based permissions that you're using to do this, can be pretty tricky when you're just talking about the Windows environment. The last webinar that we dealt with, I think I went ahead and got into the control panel a little bit and started doing some user account control, and then dealing with some of the permissions that these users can actually deal with by going to a generic Windows Explorer folder and simply trying to manage the permissions of those folders. And when you get into the permissions, whether it happens to be sharing, whether it happens to be specific properties within the security of that, this interface is not intuitive whatsoever. It might look good and be easy for the folder I'm looking in right now, but I have zero audit trail to be able to check a person and see their global encompassing permissions within the system. So the first thing I want to do on this one is just simply go back into my Enterprise Data Management administrative tool that I was showing a moment ago and talk a little bit more about the specifics on the permissions of these users. Now we can do it based on user level or based on group level, and anybody that's in a group automatically gets inherited. So if I'm in engineering, for example, or management, all of the group members that are in this management folder get whatever the management permissions are, and then I can feel free to go ahead and refine each of those users as their user level permissions. We use this as a simple aspect to control what somebody can see, and it's a very simple thing to do. If you notice right now, I've got 4 people that are in my administrative group. And if I go ahead and take a look at the permissions there, they can pretty much do anything. They can overwrite things, they can change cards, change people's administrative processes and capabilities, and they can go ahead and delete and restore files and things like that. We can get very specific, though, when it comes to the folder permissions as well. And if I go to the top level in my vault, you'll see that these management people can have access to do anything they want. Delete, destroy, check in, check out, reassign, anything that needs to happen. And this is important because you might have a user that has files checked out, and that user might be on vacation or sick, and we need access to that file. And in this case, administrators can actually assign file permissions. So I could take ownership away from somebody and then assign it to somebody else. And it's an important thing to be able to do because you don't want that data to be stuck in that one person's permissions or in their local folders. Now, taking that to a different level, because I have access to all these folders, I can do pretty much whatever I want as a manager all around. But when it comes to my employees, people in manufacturing specifically, once again, right now Dennis is the only person we have in that. And I'm just going to use him as an example for this login. But when I get down to my administrative permissions, you see that these manufacturing users can't do any of these high-end permission changes, which is exactly what you'd want. But when we get into folder permissions, it gets even deeper. Here at the top level, still, no permissions are available. Not until I get right down to this folder called manufacturing do I even have the access to be able to read file contents. Now, as a top-level folder, that's going to automatically trickle down to some of the subfolders there, but I can also refine those individually as well. So I could take my supplier drawings and maybe make those unreadable while taking my top levels and making those completely readable. Well, this all being said, when it comes to controlling the file access, the authorization and the control of that, I'm going to illustrate that now by going back to the login. So here what I have is my access to my file structure. Here we're in the vault. I'm logged in as a manager, and I have absolutely everything available to me in every aspect of the product. Now, if I go ahead and log out for a moment, again, it pushes me out of the vault. And if I go ahead and log back into my vault now as a manufacturing employee, in this case Dennis, we're going to see something significantly different. As we access the vault, well, it really doesn't look like much of a vault as far as this person's concerned. And it's all a simple matter of just changing their folder permissions. Now, on top of that, I have this person set up to be using only the latest and greatest version of a file. Right now, you see that supplier drawings folder is gone for this user, and that's because I individually took away the read access to that particular folder. We go into the release drawings. In this case, I can see an approved released version of a drawing that happens to be out there. It's the latest and greatest version that's available, and it's something within a folder that this person has permissions to. So it's easy to see. Within the administrative tool, I've got a very simple audit trail. So if I'm looking at Dennis, for example, well, Dennis is going to show me what groups he is in and what folder permissions he has. So it's a very easy way to be able to check what this person can do and a very simple audit trail to be able to control exactly what they can do. Now, yeah.
I think also one of the things, I don't know if people have caught this, but you're doing a lot of things kind of on the fly here without really shutting down and restarting, rebooting your server. Maybe traditional ways is that PDM systems would have to operate with a little more, shall we say, structure to them in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, structure when it comes to data management, we use big words like deployment and compiling software. And when you're talking about SAP or some big encompassing system like that, basically they pull up the van outside of your building and they live there for a couple of years while this system gets integrated. And changes, well, changes are a dollar sign attached to them, and they'll come in and they'll make any change that you want. Well, the beauty of this system is really about how nimble it happens to be. I mean, to illustrate that in a very simple manner, if I just go back into my admin tool, go back into my file permissions, and I actually turn on the read access for that particular folder, just by virtue of what I've done here, I can actually go ahead now and log in again or refresh as that as that manufacturing person, which in this case is Dennis. And without recompiling or restructuring my vault or having the guys take lunch off while I go ahead and change their permissions, you can see that if I go in here, it actually shows that supplier drawings folder instantly for me. And this happens whether it's a workflow change, person's permissions, or really anything within the system. Deployment is instantaneous. No recompilation of software whatsoever. So, very good point.
Go back to that time and value.
Exactly. Now, the data itself, we talk a lot about controlling files with Windows. And, you know, Windows is the foundation here, but let's all be honest. I've done it hundreds of times in my life, and I'm sure everybody else has. I've lost data, I've overwritten data, I've deleted it accidentally, and I've had to recreate it as a result. And I don't think anybody out there is going to raise their hand saying, no, that's never happened to me. So a simple example that I want to show you here is the safety net, and that's the best term I can throw out there, that a tool like EPDM is going to give you. With this, I'm just going to make a little PowerPoint presentation here for a moment. So let me clear out my screen just a little bit, and I'm actually going to go ahead and exit out of our PowerPoint here for a second, Dennis, so everybody can see how this takes place. I'm going to make a brand new PowerPoint presentation. We'll just start from a blank. And just the way anybody else starts their structure, there's some intellectual thought happening here, and a lot of times with writing, thought only happens in an organic way, so it's hard to get that thought back. Okay, so we're just going to type this out. Very simple. This is a very important file. Now, one thing we haven't discussed in this particular webinar, but is really one of my top 5 favorite things about EPDM, is the fact that it's built into Windows Explorer means that within PowerPoint or any other Office program, or frankly, any piece of software that you have loaded on your computer, a simple file save as and navigating myself over to the EPDM vault automatically gives me access into my data management storage location. You don't have to have a written and compiled add-in or any other type of plug-in for any piece of software you own. File save as does it for everything on your computer. And I try to emphasize that because if you've been through other products and had to worry about plugins for every piece of software you use, you'll really appreciate this situation. So what I'm going to do is just simply put this into a sales folder. Here we got a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to put this into my PowerPoint presentation folder. So this is a very important file. We'll go ahead and simply hit save. Now with that, if I was to navigate to that folder location just in Windows Explorer so you can see exactly what's happening here, we'll go ahead and go into presentations, and right there you see that this is a very important file. Now through my Save As and Open dialog box, I can do the same things I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to simply right click and check this file into the vault. What that'll do is allow me to document. We'll just call that first save. And actually what I have to do, because it's telling me that I can't do this while I have the file in use, which is another good security concern there, I'll go ahead and close that file now, and now I can check it into the vault. So, important file first save. That's now been checked in, and what we've now got is a state change for this particular file. So what happens to this document? Somebody's going to go ahead and check it out. In this case, I'll be the administrator. We'll open that document back up, and okay, new information has been added. Let's go ahead and quickly save that one more time, and then with very little difficulty, let's go ahead and check that back in. So now what you can see is that even with an Office document, what I've got is the capabilities to have multiple versions now with the same file name, not some coded file name that you threw a date on there, or Rev A, B, C, D, E, not knowing what Rev of Rev it is. What we've got here is the same file, and I see different information here. Now, I want to give you a very, very heavy example of what can happen to something like this. First of all, I don't have this file checked out, and I want to say that very specifically, because what I'm going to do is start another new PowerPoint presentation. Okay, this one's a totally new file. Change some text on there, and that looks great. What I'm going to do here is a file save as. Now, if I want to do a file save as, and what everybody here has done is accidentally overwritten a file, I want to take that very important file and I want to save over top of it. Okay, do you want to do it? Do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. Well, it's going to be a problem. It's going to think about it, and then it's not going to be terribly happy as to what we're trying to do here. The reason is I don't have the rights to save over that file right now. So the simple virtue that I haven't opened that file, I haven't checked it out, means that I can't save over top of it. So even right there, the safety net is intact, and we can't accidentally overwrite a file that we're really not supposed to be changing. Okay, well, we got some pretty ingenious people out there. The word idiot-proof just doesn't work in this world today, because I've seen some pretty smart guys out there that can get around things. So what I'm going to do now is go into the system, and I'm going to check that file out. Maybe I've done it on purpose. Maybe I've done it accidentally. Well, here I'm back to my new PowerPoint file. Again, a file save as. This time, let's just go ahead and write right over top of it. Yes, let's do it. All right, it took. Well, that could be good or that could be bad. I guess it depends on your perspective. But what we've now got in here, If you take a look at the file, in my preview window, I see totally new file. That's the one that we just created. I can even go through the entire process and maybe not thinking about it, even check in that new file. I'm not even going to put a note on that. So now what I've just done is I've overwritten a file, and it happens every single day. If this was just Windows, everything you've overwritten is gone, period. No recovery, unless you've got a backup tape drive, and then even that's a minor miracle to get it off of that tape drive. But what I have inside of ePDM is the option to go ahead and either get the latest version, which is the one that you see in the preview window, or I can actually go back to previous versions. I can go back to the one that's my second check-in. See my preview window? Shows the text that we saw on that slide. Or if I really screwed it up, I can also go back to my first version, my important first save. So even in the aspect that I might accidentally overwrite a file, whether it's accidentally or accidentally on purpose, I still have the capability to go back and get a previous version of that file. It's very, very essential to really have that safety net available to you, especially when we're talking CAD files with intelligent naming and intelligent file referencing. Just a simple example to illustrate that.
Good stuff, but I think we've all been there before, if we're honest, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So before we move on to another example here, let me throw another poll up real quick. And as we segue into this next topic of return on investment, we'd like to get your input on how important justifying software investments are for your organization. So if you take a minute to answer that, we will throw and share those, throw those results up and share them with you. Once we get everybody in here. A little mixture. And I think that's probably fairly typical for most companies in Michigan doing manufacturing too. Sometimes doing some justification is required, but lots of times it's more apparent and not necessarily that critical. So I think for all of our companies and scenarios moving forward, we'll see a good example of how you might be able to still make management happy with some a little bit of research and some thought going into your decision here. Let's move on here once, Darren.
Okay. The word lost, scary. The picture, even scarier.
For any of you that watched that series, again, we're not going to be switching roles here and talking about entertainment today or anything, but the role of what does it happen if we take a scenario where you lost just one file over the course of a week, and how would that affect your company? And a simple way to approach this is looking at the ROI for doing that type of a scenario. If you had an engineering file that took you 8 hours to create, maybe it took you 12 hours, and we could say that it took you 8 hours to recreate it. And if your burden rate was $50 an hour for your engineering staff, you're looking at about $400 to recreate that file. And that's not a huge investment, but if you start looking at what that cost accumulates to over multiple files lost over the period of a year, if you lost just that one file each week, you'd be looking at about $20,000 in productivity leak throughout your company. And not only that $20,000, but if you've got to recreate that file, that means you're not doing, what is it, Darren, that you'd be not able to do?
You're not able to create another file. I always think of this as the interception in the end zone returned against you for a touchdown. You know, we don't call that a 6-point turn. We call that a 12-point turn because it's the 6 you lost and the 6 they got. So in this case, it's the money you lost and the money that you didn't put towards something brand new. Very easy.
And that's often the factor that's not considered in the scenario. So we've got a couple of examples, I think, again, Darren, or you have an example you want to share with everyone?
Just got those other things at the bottom. But yeah, you know, lost data, you know, it is what it is. You put it in a place, you think you know what it's called, and you spend a half an hour trying to find a file. Maybe it's the name you thought you're looking for, and maybe it wasn't. So in a Windows scenario, the biggest problem with this is unless you're indexing your computer and you're having that happen all the time, whenever I go into Windows and I decide to do a file search, and I'll just look for the word Dennis, although that's not going to be there, star. It's essentially going to go through this. Right now my C drive isn't added to my index. But if I go ahead and hit search, I'm going to sit here and just wait for what's going to happen. We'll call this whatever we want. And it happens, and it starts to search, and we get the scroll bar along the top, and things just take forever. And that's assuming I know the name of the file. Knowing the name of the file is a rarity, especially if you're using serialized file names inside of Windows Explorer. So right now I get to sit here and wait and deal with this type of a situation. Well, when things are inside of the vault itself is controlled by Microsoft SQL. And because SQL is a relational database, not only is my search instantaneous, but I can search on many, many other things besides just a file name or just something I might know about it. In this case, if I go ahead and launch my search tool within Enterprise PDM, permissions again will determine what people can do here. But basically the search can be very simple, the search can be very broad, and it can be in multiple vaults down here on the side. If I wanted to do a complete search, we've got capabilities to look for anything that we want within the file. Not just file name, but things about specifically what the file type is. So if I wanted to look for a data card that was specifically a SOLIDWORKS part, and maybe that part was checked in or out by a particular person. Maybe I want to know what Neil is out there doing today. And if Neil's got files in his control, I want to look for files that he has that are pending approval. And that's a way for me to very specifically narrow down what I can search for. Things can get so deep on this one, and I got to find out where this checkbox is because I keep forgetting exactly where it is. But the search itself can actually search to a feature name inside of the SOLIDWORKS Feature Manager. So if I have a part called 12345 and I do a search for Cut Extrude 1, it will actually find the feature in the Feature Manager of that Cut Extrude 1. Now use it as a more practical example. Maybe you've got a feature that's called something like a manufacturing specific name or a number or a purchasable mount or a weld nut, whatever it is. You can search specifically down and drill directly into the Feature Manager of a SOLIDWORKS file. Now any of the ways that I might set this particular search up, I can always save it because this is a little bit of a tedious thing. It could be very minutia based, especially if I've got a lot of variables involved. And you can save them as a favorite the same as you would any internet email address. With this, if I just simply go ahead and select a favorite that I have called Drawings Pending Approval, it instantly comes back with any drawings, whether they're SLDDRW SOLIDWORKS files or AutoCAD DWG files, and it will actually go ahead and display each of those, the fact that they're pending approval, and I still have all the information when it comes to my preview windows, what my data card is filled out with, and if it happened to be an assembly I was looking at, some bill of materials information there as well. But it's easy to find things, whether it's based on a property, the name of a file, a description, or any other detail or variable that's built within this particular document. A lot of information that can be gleaned or can be accessed as a variety of inputs for this search. And again, SQL controls it, so all the information is pre-indexed, and it's an instant search.
Yep. And it's another area where data security really starts to shine, along with the productivity that you've got available through that SQL data searching.
Mm-hmm.
Some other examples here, and really Darren just spoke to this, searching for data. How much does that actually mean to your company from a dollar perspective? We've got an example that's based on studies that were done by SimData, saying that, and this is not just your average engineering person, but people in general at any company, spend about 20% of their time or 1 day a week looking for information that they've either done or that they need to use. So again, how does that equate out in a simple ROI form to what your company spends on looking and searching for existing information? And that's a simple formula that you might apply to your organization. Now you might say that $50 an hour is a bit more. Feel free to adjust that amount to what the burden rate is at your company, or different class of workers at different salary rates as well. And we've got another example here that Darren touched on as well. Well, I guess also finishing up this slide, what happens when you can't find it is that other side of the scenario that we talked about already too. You typically have to recreate it, so it's a double loss again scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked a little bit about releasing ECOs, but here's an example of what happens when you come ready to release a new design and the amount of time that can be spent by different people within your organization. And having that right data to the right person at the right time in this scenario also equates back to data security, of knowing that all your information is passing according to the processes people should be following. We did a presentation, I think it was last month, right, Darren, on process control.
Yep.
And that's really just another extension. Yeah, it's really just another extension of data security, making sure that the information is following a consistent path from one department to another and one person to another. So again, time can add up, and as we see in this simple example, it could be a cost of anywhere from $200 to $1,000 in just these repetitive steps that your organization is going through. And we move on to the next example, I think, is on cost of ECOs. And again, you kind of walk through that ECO template that we have. And again, that's totally figurable to follow however your organization addresses processing ECOs. It might be pretty straightforward or it might be more elaborate. You can see here on how typically make a change, BOM data has to be updated. Is that tied into a business system? Does we need to put out another Excel document that has its own life that needs to be managed? All of these are opportunities to have information out of sync. And then from experience in talking to other SOLIDWORKS customers, we found that it typically can be about the baseline price of processing an ECO is around $3,000. So if you're doing any number of these in your organization, it's again a sizable amount of money that's adding up. Now, are we going to be able to release? I should say, are we going to be able to eliminate all those ECOs, Darren?
Eliminate changes? Absolutely not. But you can eliminate all the steps, all the steps that it takes to do those. Yeah, you saw it happen right in one click. We just go ahead and have the workflow set to do all the things you do manually for you automatically.
Yep. So are we going to completely eliminate that $3,000? No way. But if we can make a significant dent in the cost of doing that operation, then you're going to be money ahead.
Yeah, I think it's all about visibility. It's all about people knowing the right thing at the right time. And this tool will definitely streamline that.
Yep. And again, what are some of the benefits that you're going to get from that? You're going to have a procedure that everybody can follow, in this case for accurate BOMs. You're going to ensure that release data is equal to the shipped product. Automate those processes. And again, time is money.
Always is.
So we're winding down here, last couple of slides, just to give everybody a quick overview on what the PDM solution entails. And again, control of your processes, secure access, making sure that the right data is getting to the right people at the right time. And this slide we're going to end with, we've been talking a lot about SOLIDWORKS data in here, but Darren's talked a little bit about PowerPoint. And you've seen the ECO form that was a Word document. The data really is unlimited, and any Windows type file can be managed in Enterprise.
Now with that, Dennis, there's a question that came through, and this is probably a good time to put that out there. But the question is as I was doing the things with PowerPoint and check in and check out, the question was, all that was done through Windows Explorer, is there any functionality backed into SOLIDWORKS itself? And what I want to do just really quickly here is open up SOLIDWORKS so everybody can see this. And I'm going to use a file that I have on my C drive right now. When we're talking about any product on your computer, the main thing I want to point out with that is that every other file of every other product that's out there is less intelligent than what we would see in a CAD system. And I'm even going to be more generic than just SOLIDWORKS. I'll say a CAD system. Because these days, parts and drawings and assemblies intelligently reference each other. So when we're talking about any product on your computer, the mechanisms I'm using are very easy and straightforward. When we're talking about a CAD system, there is capabilities within the CAD tool itself. You'll see a little tab over here in my File Explorer tab that actually shows information about the file I currently have open, the part in which that resides on this file, which is a part that's in the vault currently, what the release status of that file is, whether it's in the vault, or whether a change has taken place and the dirty flag has been triggered on that file. Now, this example, or this particular window here, would show you absolutely everything you'd need to know about a document. It gives you check-in and check-out capabilities. I could fire off a workflow if I wanted to, change the state of a file, and all of this happens directly within SOLIDWORKS, as well as Pro Engineer, Solid Edge, Autodesk Inventor, all with our ePDM tool. So because those programs are more complex in the way the files intermingle and interrelate to each other, we have capabilities and mechanisms directly within the SOLIDWORKS system for this. To take that a little bit of a step further, if I was to open one of these parts in their own window, you'll also see some right mouse click capabilities. So right within Windows Explorer, you get this functionality, but right within the SOLIDWORKS Feature Manager, I've got options for Get Latest Version, Check In, Check Out, Properties, and other things related to the enterprise data management collateral data.
Yep, good point.
So,
and a good question as well.
Yep, absolutely good question.
Next slide. We won't spend a lot of time on this at all, just to give everybody, this is sometimes a question that people walk away with, is what's the PDM enterprise system made up of? It's really an all-inclusive solution. There are no modules or options per se that you would go in and add on for different capabilities shown around this little feature circle. Every license includes the ability to use replication, workflow. It's 64-bit, Windows 7 compatible. A license of SQL is provided. All of those capabilities, and as Darren just mentioned, we support a variety of different CAD applications with integration shown in the SOLIDWORKS example we just ran through. As well as something a lot of companies want access to is eDrawings Professional. So you have the ability to measure and mark up, and that's included with every license of enterprise as well. And the ability to do BOM management, which we really didn't talk much about in this subject here today. But that, I think, is pretty much getting down to wrapping things up. We have one last slide and a couple of poll questions. Let me fire off one of the last polls here for us. And just ask if you'd like a copy of the presentation that you've seen today. That's something that we're happy to send off to you. And we'll let you finish that. We don't need to necessarily share that out here for everybody. And a couple of seconds yet, and we'll close that down and put the last one up. I know, Darren, you usually like to talk about our last question here. And while you're doing that, I'll just say on the last slide, when you think of enterprise PDM, we hope that you've walked away today realizing that it's more than just a data management for SOLIDWORKS information. It's really a data management for all of the SOLIDWORKS product suites, as well as the Microsoft Office environment or any other Microsoft Windows application as well. And that we're right in the center of that hub, if you will, managing the data for your company more effectively and securely. And I guess if there are any other questions, we'll open it up here as well briefly for a moment yet. We have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pull those questions.
Is any training available? I have a question. Training available for PDM? Definitely so. Training tends to be focused specific to your customer, to you as a customer, based on what you're implementing. It's part of the implementation process, or we can do some training if you have particular questions on things like workflow or permissions and so forth. And I think that next year you'll start to see more focused classes coming out on our calendar for people that want to learn about those subjects. So if maybe you started out today with your vault just installed locally at your main office, but now you have a remote manufacturing facility that you want to share and replicate data to, look for a class on how to set up vault replication or workflows. I think you'll see topics like that coming out as well. See if there are any other questions here.
No, that's been it.
Not Darren, I'll let you throw that last slide up, or that last poll up. And we'll thank everybody for your time today. Wish you a Merry Christmas. Hopefully everybody's got their Christmas shopping done, ready for that.
Yeah, so definitely we do appreciate your time today. We know your time's valuable, and we just want to thank you for spending an hour with us. We hope it was beneficial, and it'll just keep driving us towards additional presentations every couple of weeks or so.
Yep. If there's any particular topics that you'd like to hear about, let either Darren or I know, and we'll work those into our schedule for 2011. As I said at the beginning, I think this definitely is our last webinar on PDM for the rest of the year.
Yep, last one.